So that should be a really light and
Sri
fun.
Ramakrishna's divine humor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard it.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's a little bit boring for you.
No, it's all new. It's an all new take. An all new take.
I can go it.
So that's going to be at 5 p.m. Sorry, 4 p.m. on Sunday here. So we invite you all to come for all of that. And I'm going to get this as close as I can because we were told last time the sound wasn't great online. So we're going to try to.
Yeah, that's why I have problem, online to getting the sound.
So we can.
Now it should be better. I'm going to try to get. We're going to try to do better. Okay, listen, we're live, so why don't we start? Maharaj, thank you so much.
Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarva dharma swarupini avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see all of you again. Most of you I've seen. And thank you so much, Jeff, for inviting me again. It's nice to be here. So today's informal, and it's just, we're going to have a Q&A. So any questions you might have, I'll try my best to answer them.
Yes, I have some. Otherwise,
Did you say, oh, we already have online questions? Okay.
We certainly do. They're coming in. So who else? Do you guys want to go first since you're here, or do you want me to?
You get first dibs.
That's right.
So don't be shy. And if not, the online audience is going to start.
You're going to take over. You guys will get wiped out. So we'll start the first one.
Okay.
This is from Vidur, and sadly he's not feeling well, so he couldn't be here in person, and he sends his pranams and regards to you, Maharaj. So his question is a little bit long, so I'm going to try to do my best to read it correctly. Spiritual experiences and visions are often common among spiritual aspirants. Most of the time, these are considered to be products of one's mind. However, when we delve into the lives of individuals like Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Maha, their direct disciples, and others, we discover that they attach great significance to such experiences, viewing them as messages from the divine. The question arises, at what point does a spiritual aspirant transition from hallucination to genuine spiritual progress?
Right. Okay. So just to clarify first, I don't think I would agree necessarily that Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother gave great importance to hallucinations. And
Visions.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
He said visions.
No, I know, but then he says that, but they're usually taken to be hallucinations, right?
For this aspirants, for spiritual aspirants.
Maybe I don't fully understand the question, but so the thing is, many spiritual aspirants think that they've had spiritual experience. That doesn't mean that they've had spiritual experiences. I think that's the confusion in the question, is that there are many, many devotees who think that they have had spiritual experiences of Sri Ramakrishna or Christ or Holy Mother, when in fact they haven't, and it's just a kind of moment of emotion or sentimentality. And so if the question is, how do we distinguish genuine spiritual experiences from hallucinations, then it's tricky actually. But one thing you can do is pray. Because in fact, we find even in Sri Ramakrishna's own life that in the gospel, we know that Sri Ramakrishna is constantly speaking to Divine Mother. And not in the future Swami Medhanandaji was very skeptical. And he said, all these, you think you're talking to Mother, but in fact, it's nothing but hallucination. Then Sri Ramakrishna got worried. And what did he do? He took it directly to Mother. He said, Naran is doubting that I'm having these visions of you, O Mother. So you clear this doubt. Because he also doubted his visions. Then she gave him another spiritual vision, which he could not doubt, of her assuring him of the truth, the genuineness of his spiritual experiences. You see, so that's one way. But one thing I'll say, Sarva Devanandaji is fond of saying this. He says, because he's a guru, to some of you also, and so many of his disciples will come to him and privately tell him about their so-called spiritual experiences. And he laughs and he says, we poor monks are the only ones who are not having spiritual experiences. But what's the idea behind that? The joke is, most, not all, but many of these people think that they're having spiritual experiences when in fact they are not. You see, that doesn't mean nobody has spiritual experiences, but it's a rare achievement. It's a very rare thing. And it should be transformative. If it's a genuine spiritual experience, it should change your life. And then in the majority of cases of people who have so-called spiritual experiences, they remain the same old Tom, Dick, or Harry, which suggests that it's probably not genuine. I was in Europe a few weeks ago, and my first stop was in Amsterdam. I was attending a 3-day conference called Mystical Experience and Entropy at Leiden University. It's an international conference. I met a lot of interesting philosophers, cognitive scientists, psychologists, many. And the majority of them have claimed to have had spiritual experiences through drugs, especially psychedelics like LSD, ayahuasca, and these other things. And they feel very strongly about it. And in our tradition, we don't deny that it's possible. But at the end of the day, even if you have these so-called spiritual experiences and you remain the same person afterward, if it doesn't make you a better person, a more spiritual person, then how valuable are these experiences? So it's a long answer, but
and a long question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's you guys have a chance to ask Swami a question before we get another one from the studio audience.
Questions?
Yes.
Yes.
In regard to this, what I was just saying about, it is not mind productivity. How we can say that?
It's not my what, sir?
Whatever is happening, whatever we heard, so
Mm.
basically, if I talk for myself,
Mm.
I haven't had any, nothing. So these are not only the words. In present day, is there anybody? Have you seen that such kind of things? He is talking truly, and there is a transformation. The trance state, I haven't seen anybody. I have seen somebody who says that I goes in meditation, I don't have any feeling.
Yeah.
I even played with him.
Yeah.
I even played. I'm so sorry, but I even played with him. But when I see him that saying that, hey, what you did, you just got into a state where you don't have any feeling. That's all.
Yeah.
It's not story making, because now there is a buzz around. There is always buzz around in YouTube and everywhere. You see that every Tom, Dick,
I know,
Harry has
yeah.
some kind of experience.
It's the fashion now.
It's
Yeah.
a complete
Yeah.
fashion.
Yeah.
It's not simply what, because I started myself doubting whatever is written and whatever has been told by the ancient saint.
Yeah, but we should be careful about that, because just because something has become fashionable doesn't mean that it's all fraudulent, that it's all a lie, right? So we should be careful about distinguishing. So the key criterion is those people who are claiming to have spiritual experiences, have they been changed? Have they been transformed by the experiences? And that's up to you as an individual to decide, to judge. Now, many times, people who have had these realizations, they hide them. And they may even try to hide the fact that they've been transformed. That's also possible. And they're not bothered whether you think they've had a spiritual experience or not. These people who really have. Do you see what I mean? But if you ask me, have I seen, I'm in a monastic order, I've met some great saints, actually. And you can see in their life that they're the genuine article. Depends on whom you hang out with, you know. What are your social circles? But I'm with monks all day, so that has its own.
I'm not the monk.
It's a self-selecting population. Yeah,
It may not be possible.
right.
But what changes?
Character,
How do you measure?
character, way of life. There's one monk. He's no longer with us, but constantly taking Sri Ramakrishna's name, but in a completely unshowy way, spontaneously, and you just see this bliss in his eyes and in his expression, in his overall face. That leaves an impression. You know? And the day before he left his body, a brahmachari asked him whether he had realized God. And he said, yes, I realized God. And he said it with such conviction, you know, and in a private setting, not in front of others. And anyway, there are those kinds of examples.
And how does miracles are associated with godliness? Is this with some association?
No, one can perform miracles without being godly, but godly people may perform miracles and may not. That's the thing. You see, Jesus performed miracles and he was a great saint. He was God himself. And there are others who only perform miracles but are not saintly. And because if you look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, for instance, there's a whole section explaining these siddhis, how to get siddhis, these
18 cities.
abilities to perform different miracles, becoming extremely small, becoming very large, transportation, like going from one place to another without any physical vehicle, things like that. But then Patanjali sounds a warning and says, if you're a sincere spiritual aspirant, don't get caught up in this stuff, because it's a great danger. That you get so caught up in developing these siddhis that it becomes another source of ego, which works at cross purposes with your spiritual life and your spiritual progress. So better not. And so Sri Ramakrishna always discouraged trying to cultivate these spiritual powers, this ability to perform miracles. But is it possible that some saints can perform miracles? Certainly. Is it necessary? Absolutely not.
Have you seen?
No.
At least middle of India is crowded with such kind of miracles nowadays. So I doubt.
Our order is very strongly against it. That's why our monks are not big on those things.
Because for me, I started doubting. Whatever written in Sanskrit is not a connection. It is not the correct thing.
It is not what, sir?
It's not a correct thing. Whatever written in Sanskrit, that means it is not, cannot be the Vedva. Cannot.
But why are you drawing
Because
that?
I started doubted about this. Just talk about like that. So this entire 18 siddhi, Adima, Laguma, Garima, etc., etc.
Yeah, but the thing is, Gita doesn't talk about siddhis, nor do the Upanishads, for instance. Why should you throw out the baby with the bathwater?
I don't have the capability to judge.
Well, then you should come to more satsangas and watch Sarvapenji's lectures. We don't talk about siddhis much, you see. It's not the important thing in spiritual life.
I was reading through one of the quote.
Sri Ramakrishna gives a beautiful example. He says, there's one person who spends many, many years doing all sorts of weird austerities in order to get this siddhi to be able to walk across the water. And then he comes back and runs to somebody and says, aren't you impressed? This is so incredible that I've done this. It might have been, I don't remember the exact story, but it might be his guru or something like that. The guru laughs and he says, I can hire a boat for 5 paisa and go across the river. So is it anything great to be able to cross the river without a boat? You see, what's the point in all that effort doing something that is unnecessary from a spiritual standpoint?
Let me mention, for those online here, can you tell us if the sound is okay? And also, if you have questions, type them in the chat so that we can get those answered for you. Because there's another question that I got on text message,
Okay.
but okay, so I'll ask one more and then it's all up to you guys. I do not find Sri Ramakrishna or Sri Srima recommending severe austerities in order to reach the supreme goal. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Why then did so many of the direct disciples put themselves through superhuman austerities? In many cases, this was severely detrimental to their health. Why so?
Yeah, it really depends. These questions are hard to answer. But look at, what does austerity mean? That's part of the question. Tapasya, that's the Sanskrit word. And there are different ways of defining it. I think the questioner has in mind physical austerities. But that's not the only kind of austerity, and it's certainly not the highest kind of austerity. Gita talks about bodily austerity, but interestingly, Shariram Tapa is defined as Deva Dvija Guru Prajna Pujanam Shauchamarjavam Brahmacharyam Himsacha Shariram Tapa Uchyate. Bodily tapas is bowing down, like I did pranams to Sri Ramakrishna, bowing down to God, to your Guru, and so on, and saints. Deva Dvija Guru Prajna Pujanam Shaucham Arjavam. Be internal and external purity, Shaucham. Arjavam, uprightness of character. Brahmacharyam, purity in thought, word, and deed. Purity in thought, word, and deed. Ahimsa, non-injury toward everyone, toward all creatures. That's bodily austerity. You don't see any mentions of standing on one leg for 40 years or starving yourself. No. And then there are other kinds of austerity mentioned in the Gita. Vangmayam tapa, anudvegakaram vakyam, satyam priyahitam chet, swadhyayagasanam chaiva, vangmayam tapa uchyate. What you speak. So verbal austerity. What is verbal austerity? Austerity of speech. Krishna defines it as saying something which is beneficial. If I speak to you, I should say something that's beneficial to you and that doesn't hurt you. And it should be truthful. All three things. See, sometimes people say apriya shotto in Bangla, which means you say something truthful, but it hurts the person that you're telling. It could be true, but you should be very careful about saying things. It doesn't mean you should never say anything that's unpleasant, even if it's true. It depends on context. Many times parents have to say unpleasant truths to their children, and vice versa also sometimes kids telling parents unpleasant truths about themselves. So that's sometimes necessary. It's not that. But don't unnecessarily say things that are hurtful in the name of truthfulness. That's one thing. Then swadhyaya abhyasanam, constantly thinking about high spiritual things by watching spiritual talks, attending satsangas, reading the great holy scriptures in different religious traditions. That's austerity of speech, not maunam. You see, so Krishna is redefining what austerity means in a less kind of physical way. And then mental tapas. The basic idea in mental tapas is absolute purity of mind. You can't think an impure thought in your mind. Your mind is so pure. That's the highest kind of austerity. And I'm reminded of an incident in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, when Nadan comes with his friend Bhavanath. And Nadan tells Sri Ramakrishna, hey, Bhavanath, he's renounced fish and pan, fish and betel leaf. Mach pan tag koreche. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, why did you renounce fish and pan? That's not real renunciation. True renunciation is renunciation of lust and greed. So that's true renunciation. That's true austerity, I think. Now, coming back to this question.
He says he meant mostly bodily austerity.
Right, so that's the clarification. So the thing is, Sri Ramakrishna himself performed many kinds of bodily austerity, actually. I mean, and also harmed his health in certain ways as a result. And yes, many of the direct disciples. But see, the thing is, when Sri Ramakrishna first passed away, first left his body, 1886, and then the direct disciples, the monastic disciples, shifted to Boranagar Math, this monastery, which is considered a haunted house. They barely had any money. So that kind of physical austerity was sort of automatic, it was necessary, because they didn't have much money. They weren't getting enough money, so they could barely get enough food to nourish themselves. They weren't getting a well-balanced meal. So that was one kind of austerity which they had to do, simply because now look at us. Now the Ramakrishna mission is flourishing by Holy Mother's grace. And you see, but at that time when it was first starting out, that was forced austerity in a physical sense. So that's part of the answer, is that these direct disciples, you have to imagine, this is pre-Ramakrishna mission. I mean, even because the Ramakrishna mission started in the late 1890s, and we're talking 1880s now. And they barely had anything. And so that was not even austerity by choice. That was austerity by necessity, we could say. Now, another part of this is that depending on the individual spiritual aspirant, some individual spiritual aspirants will find it helpful to do some degree of physical austerities as well. And that's an individual thing. Nobody can say, as an absolute statement that everybody should perform X, Y, and Z physical austerity. But a spiritual aspirant might find at a particular time in their spiritual life that it might be helpful to give up whatever. Let's say if they're non-vegetarian, they give up meat. Or they feel like fat. Of course, many Hindus fast on special occasions, either Ram Nam, Ekadashi, or on special days like Kali Puja or Shivaratri. Will you say that that's unnecessary? For some people, that may not be necessary. For other people, it's helpful in spiritual life. So who's to say? The important thing is not to judge other people and not to say that one should not do any physical austerities. That's one mistake. And the other is to think that doing physical austerities is the be-all and end-all in spiritual life. Both of these extremes should be avoided, I think. Some physical austerity also is good, as long as you don't take it to extremes. Simple living, high thinking. Yeah.
Cool. No, you guys, your turn.
You guys are shyer than the
I
online
know.
audience here.
They're hiding behind being a nun. No, actually not. But.
Yeah.
I'm just here to listen first and then talk.
Okay, all right.
Just now you told like physical austerity. So this is like, then why people are going for that? Like we have been hearing a lot of like we're going to Himalayas and just doing that to extremes and just taking that from. So what is the need on that? So they say you're not really.
See, if you engage in physical austerities in a spiritual way with a spiritual attitude, the idea is the whole aim is to break body consciousness. We're identified with the body, and so one way of starting to erode your identification with the body is to put your body through hardship. You see, the person who does not want to put his or her body through any hardship is the person who is most closely identified with the body. You see, that's why I gave a lecture a few months ago in Hollywood called Spiritualizing Physical Fitness. And that's one of the points I made, is that most people, lazy people who don't want to do physical exercise, don't want to tax their body. They don't want to put their body through hardship. They want to sleep, or they want to sit on a couch and watch TV instead, you see. Because all physical exercise is a form of austerity. Jeff and I just went to the gym today, so we can attest to that. It's hard, it's painful, but it's good for you. So if you have a spiritual attitude and you don't take it to extremes, doing physical austerities can actually help you to break your identification with the body, which is one of the fundamental aims in spiritual life, actually. We suffer because we mistakenly identify with the body-mind complex.
So you mean like you're disconnecting the body and the mind, you go out of the body and just look from outside, and you see like your body is not taking that pain, though you're like standing for a long time.
Even if the body is in pain, you are not in pain. You see, you can take a step back from your own body. After some time, that happens. Some like ultra marathoners, they say that they hit this special kind of runner's high after some time, where they actually feel disconnected from their body, and they might be running 80, 100, 150, 200 miles, but they don't feel it. How's that possible? You see.
I felt it in some part at some point. Like when I was
Marathon
like,
running
running,
does.
yeah, like you just
Marathon running it does.
Yeah, but there are different things. There are different things that can trigger that.
keep on running. You don't really know like after some time that you're running. You're just in
Yeah.
mode of running.
Yeah, I'm a runner,
Okay.
and so I've got little glimpses of that too. Yeah. Yeah. One thing, for instance, every morning I do Surya Namaskars, sun salutations, and instead of doing the mantras based on Surya, worshipping sun, I do my Ishta mantra instead, mentally. You see, so I repeat the Ishta mantra as I do each of the 12 asanas in the Surya Namaskar. That's a way of spiritualizing even that sun salutation, which seems like just a physical asana, physical posture. But no, that can also become a spiritual practice if you do it that way.
Do you have other suggestions for spiritualizing physical exercise?
Well, yeah, you got to watch my lecture. It's a 1 hour lecture on
We're
this.
trying to get a little hint though.
There's so many things.
One sit up, one mantra.
Yeah. There you
Another
go.
push up, another mantra.
There you go.
There are many things to say about the need for physical fitness in spiritual life. Body is a temple of God. Each one of us has God within us, which means that the human body is actually a living temple of God. So we have a responsibility as spiritual aspirants to revere the body. Revere it how? As a temple of God, by keeping it healthy. And if we neglect the body in any way, it's showing a neglect, also a kind of a lack of respect or reverence for the divine within us. That should be the fundamental attitude. Yeah, there are many other things I can say, but you see, another thing is, Taittiriya Upanishad talks about the 5 levels of being, which is often mistakenly understood as the Pancha Kosha, the Pancha Koshas. This is actually classical Advaita Vedanta of Shankaracharya and his followers. They use the word kosha. If you go to the original Upanishad, you don't find the word kosha used even once. You find 2 words used instead. Pancha Atma and Pancha Purusha. the 5 Atmas or the 5 Purushas, neither of those means kosha. The 5 Atmas means literally the 5 levels of self. And the 5 Purushas mean the same thing. Purusha means self. You see. What are the 5 levels? Annamaya. Annamaya Atma. You see. It's our self at the level of Annamaya, the physical body. And then the next one is Pranamaya Atma. The self of at the level of the vital being, as Sri Aurobindo calls it. And then Manomaya Atma, the mental self. Then the Vijnanamaya Atma. Now, Vijnana is interpreted in different ways. Sri Aurobindo very interestingly interprets it via Sri Ramakrishna as this very high spiritual state of Vijnana, like Bhavamukha. And Anandamaya Atma is the bliss self, that where you feel your connection with the divine. All of these are different levels, but real levels of the self. They're parts of our identity. And Swami Vivekananda again and again says that the goal of life is to manifest the divinity within at all levels of our being, which means that we should also manifest our divinity even at the physical level, even at the pranamaya level, even at the mental level, you see. And there again, exercise helps us, you see. People who do regular exercise, you're going to find, and another important thing, many scientific studies have been coming out recently. One that I mentioned in this lecture, this study found that doing regular physical exercise is 1.5 times more effective than taking prescription antidepressants for mental health issues. And one of the biggest problems with people who suffer from severe depression is that they don't want to exercise. But if you get them to exercise, that solves a lot of the problem for many of these people. That doesn't mean you should not take prescription medicine. It might be necessary. But these new studies are saying that as a first-line treatment for mild to moderate cases of mental health issues like depression or anxiety, exercise should be the first-line treatment. Then you can look, if that doesn't solve the problem, then you can look into supplementing it with prescription medicines. It's so effective because there's an intimate connection between body and mind. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. Why is there? In Hinduism, it's very easy to explain because in all Indian philosophies, the mind itself is jada. It's just a subtle form of matter. Jada means insentient. The mind is just as insentient as the physical body. It sounds very strange to some Westerners. Which means what? If the mind is just a subtle form of matter, then there's a direct connection between the body and the mind because they're both forms of matter, constantly interacting with each other. So anything you do to the body is going to obviously have an effect on the subtle body, which is the mind, and vice versa. So now when you exercise, there's a feedback loop, a positive feedback loop where the mind also becomes more positive. You're going to be better able to sit for meditation, sit for longer, be more concentrated, with more focus. And then that's also going to improve your physical health as well. And so it's a kind of virtuous circle. So because the body and mind are intimately connected, that's another reason why physical exercise is so important. You're going to find, I find that in our monastic order, the monks, look at, have any of you had the privilege of meeting Gautamanandaji? 94, 95 years old. I don't know exactly how old he is. Senior vice president of the Ramakrishna order. And he has been doing physical exercise since he was a boy, every day without fail. Even now, he does sun salutations in his 90s. And he used to swim across the Ganga, this and that. And he's fit as a fiddle, you can just see. And he has a tejas glowing. You know, his face glows with not just physical vitality, but a real spiritual glow. And then there are other kinds of sadhus who never do exercise, and you can also tell that too. Yes.
I have something like on this. I mean, I had like a little bit of mental pain. So I was not doing, I tried on doing that actually, went to the gym and started on this. But somewhere I was not connecting with that. So somewhere I was.
But maybe you weren't doing the right exercise. Another thing is you should find, I have a feeling there's an exercise for everyone and that it's waiting to be discovered. So many kinds of, going to the gym. You said going to the gym.
Yeah, I didn't.
You're depriving yourself of the beauty of nature.
Yeah.
One of my favorite kinds of exercise is jogging in the Hollywood Hills. Incredible views of the ocean, of the mountains. Why would I go to the gym if I, you see? So, you see, find out, there's an exercise for everyone, I guarantee you.
Yeah, so what
Once you get over the tamas of, you see, most people, there's an initial period where it's very painful. That's true. If anybody who's not used to exercise, it'll be very painful to do exercise suddenly like that. No, but if you keep at it, the Gita talks about sattvika happiness. It's like poison in the beginning and becomes like nectar in the end. Physical exercise is just like that for lazy people. In the beginning, physically lazy people, it doesn't mean you're lazy in other respects, but there are many physically lazy people who are not lazy, in their work or in raising their kids, but they don't want to do anything to exercise their body. So get off your butt and do it regularly for 1 month, regularly, without fail, even if it's like poison. And after that 1 month, you're going to start cultivating a taste for it. Then you're going to, if you skip a day, you're going to somehow feel off, less energetic, and then you're going to feel like I miss it actually. Then you'll want to do it on your own. This is true of japa as well, spiritual practices. In the beginning, it may not feel good, it might feel mechanical, but after some time, you've developed such a taste for it. If you miss it for some reason or you can't do it, you'll feel somehow something is missing in your daily life.
Yeah, so
That's the way
I couldn't just continue on that one.
Yeah.
So I started on cultivating my hobbies.
Your
Like,
hobbies.
I'm like art, I'm into art and
That's
sculpting.
fine. That's not a substitute for physical exercise.
So that
Yeah.
took me actually out from that.
No, that's good. That's good.
So
But
when I'm stressful, I just go and
Yeah.
just start doing
but exercise helps, and I bet there's an exercise waiting for you that you'll like.
Yeah,
I think
and
you
of
haven't-
course,
Yeah, don't give up on exercise. That would be a mistake. And it'll also help with mental health and positivity. And it doesn't mean don't do art. Do art and also do physical exercise. Find one that suits you. There's so many kinds. Cycling, swimming, jogging, different kinds of athletic activities like sports. You can do badminton, tennis, table tennis. Table tennis isn't okay. Yeah, find something that works for you. That's my recommendation.
So Jeff, next time when Maharajji come, we will have outdoor activities running. And
I'm actually thinking, I have a lot of outside the box ideas for our ashramas, and if I'm ever given charge of a center, I want to do things like spiritual hikes, spiritual jogs up to, like if I were in Hollywood, I'd take devotees up to the Hollywood Hills, and make that a spiritual practice. Why only sitting for lectures and this and that? Everything can be spiritualized. Nivedita understood that. And she said in her introduction to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, she said, one of the greatest messages that Swami Vivekananda taught is henceforth no distinction between sacred and secular. One of the biggest mistakes we make in spiritual life is compartmentalizing and saying, spiritual life is when I wake up in the morning and I force myself to sit in the meditation room, the shrine for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, trying really hard to do my japa that my guru told me, but falling asleep or getting distracted and thinking about what I'm going to cook for breakfast. And then once I come out of the room, then my day starts. Then I'm worldly. Then I raise my kids. Then I go to work. Then I do my exercise. This is a fundamental mistake in spiritual life. Every moment of the day, every waking moment, every sleeping moment ideally should be spiritualized. How can you remain connected with the divine in all walks of life? Gita talks about satata yukta. How do you stay ever connected? 24/7 connectivity with God. That's the challenge in spiritual life. Not just for 5 minutes in the morning and evening. And physical exercise is also a way of communing with God, with the divine. Everything can be. Or,
taking care of the temple. Yeah.
yes, not just taking care of the temple. You see, one of the things I recommend in my physical fitness lecture is mentally repeating the mantra and synchronizing it with either the breath or the stride, depending on what the exercise is, or the stroke if you're swimming. And then that's also, you're doing japa at the same time. So that's also kind of meditation. Think about swimming, where it's a kind of literal sensory deprivation chamber. You're underwater, no distractions. It's just you and the mantra. What a wonderful thing. How is that not a meditation? So it goes beyond just taking care of the body.
Other
For
questions?
more, you've got to watch the lectures. Spiritualizing
lecture,
physical
plug the
fitness.
Other questions?
Plato talks about a person or man trying to take control of himself, using the metaphor of the man, the lion, and the monster.
Mhm.
Can those be related to the three gunas? No.
Well, explain them, the three things.
So he says that we're a man is made up of those three parts: a man, a monster, and a lion.
Mhm.
The man has to tame the lion, and then the man and the lion together can help control the monster.
Mm.
And the monster being obviously our
Maybe-
things like our, this.
Lowest propensities,
Yeah,
maybe.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The most selfish
And
parts
so,
of us.
and I've always,
That's interesting.
once I learned about the three gunas, I've always looked at it that way.
Mm. That would be a great research project.
And I hear you talk
Comparing
about three
Plato's-
energies and so forth. Well,
Yeah.
and I'm surprised that I've never come across anything
Yeah.
comparing the,
That's great. Yeah.
those two concepts.
Plato's man, lion, monster in relation to sattva, rajas, and tamas.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I've always wondered that because years ago, before I knew anything about the three gunas or about Plato or anything like that, there would be different times when I would, think to myself, something would happen and, or I would do something and then regret it later.
Yeah.
And I would say to myself, what am I, what am I doing? I feel like I have three different people in me.
Yeah.
And I actually named them.
Right.
And one was the highest, the second was the middle, and then
Oh,
the third was
interesting.
the lowest.
This is before you studied Vedanta.
Yeah, this was before.
Oh, that's very interesting. Look at that.
Yeah, and so, and again, like I said, ever since once I found out about the three gunas, and I've never wanted to say anything because I thought, okay, I think they're related, but maybe they aren't. But maybe somebody would think I was crazy. So.
No, I like it. And Gita and Sri Ramakrishna are unanimous in saying that if you were to summarize their views on the three gunas, they would say sattva liberates, rajas binds, tamas destroys. And it sounds like this, this monster destroys, the lion, you can say, binds might be, but the idea is that it's very aggressive, and which might be a good correspondence with rajas, which is the seat of passion, emotion, attachment, strong attachments and desires. And man, of course, in Plato is about reason, self-discipline, self-control, restraint, right? So that's all very sattvic, actually. So at least the monster and the man, I think you can make a strong case for connecting them with tamas and sattva respectively. Now, to what extent Plato's lion can be connected to rajas, that remains to be seen. I have to look at the original text, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I asked a question because I see the three gunas I assume we all do in ourselves at different times.
Exactly. In the course of a day,
And
we might wake up and feel very tamasic until we have our cup of coffee in the morning, and then we become rajasic, and then maybe there are a few moments in the shrine where we're feeling a little more sattvic and we can really focus on God. So in the course of the day too, and different things that we eat, different things that we do, also affect which guna is predominating in us. There are many things.
Yeah, because I always think that, okay, am I just lazy? Am I this or that? I'm trying to think of things that, elevate or change the mood. Or, I don't know. I don't want to say the way I feel. Maybe it is the way I feel.
You got to come to the lecture tomorrow because the whole lecture is on the three gunas in spiritual life, a practical guide. And I'm going to talk about how to make yourself more sattvic in very concrete ways. And so
Perfect.
please come. That would be great. Yeah.
Questions? What suggestions do you have for us to really understand non-attachment and how we can apply it in our lives so that we don't just become detached and not care about things, but
Indifferent.
yeah.
How
What's
can
the
you be
difference
detached without being indifferent? So what is the difference between detachment and indifference?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, especially, for instance, Ramakrishna would tell householders, be detached toward your own children. And you might think, what, that sounds cruel or heartless, or what, do I not care about my kids? It's not about not caring. You should love them deeply while also at the same time being detached. That's the trick. Sri Ramakrishna would contrast daya with maya. He said daya, which means compassion in Bengali. Compassion is loving everyone equally, but without any attachment, by seeing God in everyone, the same God in everyone, in different forms, in different manifestations. And Maya, in diametrical contrast, is selfish attachment toward those who are somehow connected to me and mine. I am selfishly attached to my spouse because he or she is my spouse. I love my kids because they're my kids, and I'm deeply attached to them. And if they go away for 1 week, I miss them terribly, and I keep thinking about them. That's attachment. That's a bondage in spiritual life. You see, I'm selfishly attached to my car because I'm very proud of my Mercedes-Benz. Selfish attachment. You see. So the sweet spot is detachment with love. But that love has a completely different quality. It's a qualitatively different love from the kind of selfish, clingy love that comes with attachment. You see, any time that there's selfishness or ego or attachment in your relationship with another human being or with an item, whether it's a piano or a car, it is a source of suffering. And it makes you weak because it means your happiness depends on that person or that object. You see, you are not Atma Tripta, you're not satisfied in yourself. You're a bhikari, you're a beggar actually. And there's so many parents, I feel very sorry for these parents, whose whole life and prana is in their children. It's a little bit sad actually. You should have your own life. And it becomes a great burden on the children because the children feel it. It's called helicopter parenting. Constantly micromanaging and hovering, not letting your kids grow in their own way. Don't do this, do that, and being terribly frightened. You can't let your kid play for 5 minutes alone because out of fear. This is a terrible bondage from a spiritual standpoint for the parents. You see, that all stems from selfish attachment, and because you don't have detachment. So a good parent should be detached in order to raise your kid well. And this, I'm specifically telling a room full of Indian parents for a reason. I know because I was raised by Indian parents, Bengali parents especially. But mine were actually, fortunately, less attached than some of the other ones in that way. And that was good. I appreciated it. My sister needed a little bit more hand-holding. So it depends on the kid, I guess. But I liked the freedom I got growing up.
Questions? You'll regret it later when you.
Well, let me add one more thing to this, just in response to your question. Chapter 18, Gita. Gita, this is linked to your question about the gunas as well. Krishna explains, based on this, the three gunas classification, three kinds of doer, karta in Sanskrit. The sattvika doer, what are the qualities? Mukta sango nahambadi dhriti utsaha samanditaha siddhyo nirvikaraha karta sattvika uchyate. The sattvika karta is somebody who is completely free from attachment, mukta sangha. Mukta sango anahamvadi, free from egoism. Many people are very boastful and kind of arrogant, kind of brag about how great they are when they do something. Those are all signs of ego. That's not a sattvika kind of action. Anahambadi, dhriti utsaha samanvitaha. So coming directly to your question about, does being detached from your work mean that you're going to be indifferent to it? No. Krishna says the sattvika doer is one who is full of dhriti and utsaha. Dhriti means perseverance. When you start something, you don't just stop halfway through out of boredom or because you're tired. No. Full perseverance throughout. Second, utsaha, enthusiasm, utshaha in Bangla. Full enthusiasm. So not at all indifference. But you'll find that the people who are most attached can be the most enthusiastic in their work. And why? The next quality of a sattvika doer, the last one, siddhya siddhyo nirvikaraha, equal in success and failure. That's a sign of detachment. The surgeon, okay, who has to perform a life-saving surgery. And there are many ways that person can perform the surgery. One is in a very rajasic spirit. What would that look like? It would be, I'm going to do this, but I want name and fame as a result. I'm going to save this patient, so I have my name in big letters in the New York Times. and I'll get that promotion I've been wanting for 5 years, and I get a nice, then I'm going to buy a new yacht. Rajasic. Sattvic is what? That person might perform the surgery in exactly the same way, outwardly speaking. You see, the Rajasic surgeon doesn't mean that he's doing it badly. He probably does it very well. You can think of many Rajasic people who are incredibly competent in their work. So it's not that the work suffers necessarily. It can sometimes, but it could also be very good. The Sattvika surgeon is doing the same kind of surgery, but detached. And that person is not in it for the name and fame. He wants to save the patient, but he knows, or she knows, that whether the surgery is going to be successful or not is not up to the doctor. It's up to God. So in that sense, Sri Ramakrishna says God laughs twice. Once when there are two brothers fighting over a property and saying, or fighting over land and saying, this part of the land is mine and that part of the land is yours. And God laughs. Why? Because all the land is nothing but God's. Nobody owns anything. Everything is God's. Second time God laughs is when a doctor says, very arrogantly to a patient, I'll save you. Who are you? Who is the doctor to save anyone? The spiritual attitude is, by the grace of God, I may be able to save you as an instrument. Anyway, so that's the end of my answer.
Yeah,
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
Questions? I'll ask another one then.
Yeah, sure.
See Maharaj here. For vichara, self-inquiry, how do we go from mental gymnastics to an actual experience of substance of the self?
Okay, this is your opening a can of worms here. It's a kind of a hobby horse of mine, but I don't make many friends with the spiel I'm about to tell you. But it's the following. And one thing I have to say about the spiel is it's not just me randomly going off on this practice, but it's grounded in what Shankara himself taught, as far as I understand it, and what Sri Ramakrishna taught. Okay, so these are not bad sources. Okay, let's start with Shankara. Shankara says, in order to study Advaita Vedanta and practice Advaita Vedanta, you should be endowed with to perfection the fourfold qualifications, what's called sadhana chatushtaya in Sanskrit, the fourfold sadhana. Intense viveka, which means what? Yeah, discrimination between the permanent, the impermanent, the real and the unreal. Intense vairagya, intense detachment. The usual translation is dispassion, but I think detachment might actually be better. Are you really not attached to anybody or anything? The Shat Sampat, the 6 treasures in spiritual life. Total control of the senses, total control of the mind, and so on and so forth. Mumukshutva, intense longing for liberation. Now, Shankara says, until you can answer yes, 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 yes to the fourfold qualifications in the full, you are not eligible to practice Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga is a path of vichara, the one you're asking about. What you should be practicing, if you are not a sufficiently pure spiritual aspirant endowed with the fourfold sadhana, what you should be doing is a combination of karma yoga and bhakti yoga, according to Shankara. Okay? What does Sri Ramakrishna say about the same thing? Let me tell you 2 things that he says. One is not what he said, but about an incident in his life. He's in Dakshineshwar doing his sadhana. And a monk from, I think, Punjab comes to the area. A sannyasi. And Sri Ramakrishna hears that he is having an affair with a woman. And so Sri Ramakrishna approaches him and says, hey, what's this I'm hearing about this affair you're having with the woman? And he gives a big smile to Sri Ramakrishna, this Swami, and says, oh, let me explain. You see, this whole world is Maya. So how can my affair with that woman alone be real? And then Sri Ramakrishna says, and in such strong language that it was watered down by Chaitanandaji in his translation. The watered down version is I spit on your Vedanta, but in fact he says I piss on your Vedanta. So the danger, according to Sri Ramakrishna, in practicing the path of inquiry when you're not actually ready for it is that Sri Ramakrishna would say, "Nije ke thokabe, ar onno te ke thokabe." You deceive yourself and you deceive others. And so that means you're short-circuiting your own spiritual progress, you're actually going backwards in spiritual life, and you're deceiving others and harming others. Okay, so I personally feel like you were saying that now having and bragging about your spiritual experiences has become the new fad, the latest thing. Same goes with this path of vichara, it seems to me. That way too many people are practicing it. I put practicing in quotes because they're frankly not, many of them. Some of them are sincere. Majority are not eligible, in my opinion. And they probably are better off not practicing it. So that's why, this is obviously a very controversial and unpopular thing to say, but I'm happy to say unpopular things that I think are true, if I think that they're beneficial for people to hear. So let the YouTube trolls do their worst.
Then do you feel it's dangerous to be doing lectures on these things to the general public? That's interesting.
Yeah, if I were to do them on my own, certainly. If I were to say, I want it, so that's why a great danger in spiritual life is wanting to do things on your own. So I never do that. So it's only if I'm asked by my order, because I see the order as Sri Ramakrishna in the physical form. So if they ask me, or Sarvadev Ranzi, who is my current head, ask me to give a lecture, then I give a lecture. Otherwise, I don't. Doing things on your own in that way, that's the danger, because that could stem from ego. And even when you're invited to give a lecture, there's always, of course, a danger of ego there too. And so you always have to be. So vichara means two different things. I mean, at least two different things in different contexts. One kind of vichara is absolutely necessary for all spiritual aspirants, including bhaktas and karma yogis. That's not the self-inquiry in the sense of Ramana Maharshi. But it's what Sri Ramakrishna himself recommends. When somebody asks him in the gospel, Upai ki, what is the way to God realization? He says, Prarthana ashodashod vichara. Prayer and sadasat vichara. And he says, what is sadasat vichara? Sat is the one divine truth, the divine reality. Whether you think of it as God or your higher self, whatever it is. Asat, kamani kanchan, lust and greed, worldly things. So we constantly have to discriminate between what's worth pursuing in spiritual life and what we should be renouncing, what we should be avoiding. That's crucial for everybody across the board. So I don't know, but I think you were referring to specifically to the Advaitic kind of vichara. That's why I said what I said. But there's another kind of vichara which is indispensable for all spiritual aspirants. That's what I would emphasize. Vichara is crucial, but this path of self-inquiry, I think, is meant only for a tiny minority of spiritual aspirants. That's my opinion. Sri Ramakrishna would say that in the Kali Yuga, which is the current age, he said people have tremendous body consciousness. They're so strongly identified with their bodies that the path of Advaita Vedanta is just, it's much too difficult for the vast majority of people. Singing is another great danger in spirit, and for monks especially. One monk told us in training center, he said, in class one day, he said, there are two things you should be very careful about. One is lecturing, the other is singing. Because both can easily become these big sources of ego, actually. In the name of spirituality. So a sincere spiritual aspirant will always reflect, whenever they're doing anything, how you interact with your family, how you interact with your boss at work and with your co-workers, in the course of the day. And you have to be brutally honest with yourself and ask yourself, was I egoistic? Was I letting ego get in the way of my work or in the way that I'm interacting with my children or this and that? And it's difficult. That's vichara. Doing that. Doing what I call brutally honest self-assessment. That itself is a form of vichara. And it's very necessary in spiritual life. When I'm singing, I don't sing, but so that's at least one danger that I can safely avoid. Lecturing, I do. So, but singers, when I sing, like let's say I'm a singer and I'm singing in a huge hall with 1,000 people, beautiful bhajans, Obviously, the songs themselves are very spiritual. Maybe even I'm a great singer, and so I have sing with a wonderful bhava, and people will come to me and say, you brought tears to my eyes. Now, how do I react to that? Do I get puffed up with pride? Does my ego, do I get a bigger head as a result? That means that I'm not doing it in the right spirit as a spiritual aspect. That means there's rajas in the way that I'm singing. That's why Sri Ramakrishna would say, when you sing, imagine, not even imagine, directly address God. Your audience should be God, not the people in the room. That's a very sattvic attitude. But unless you do vichara, you won't even be able to catch yourself. It's very easy to justify so-called spiritual activities, whether it's puja or singing or lecturing, giving spiritual lectures, because they're quote-unquote spiritual, right? So they must be good. No, that's the thing about, I'll talk about this tomorrow in the lecture in the temple. Seemingly spiritual activities like charity, giving in charity, can be sattvic, can be rajasic, can be tamasic. This is in the Bhagavad Gita. You see, even so-called spiritual practices, spiritual activities, austerities, 3 different kinds: sattvic austerity, rajasic austerity, tamasic austerity. You see, so that's true of everything. But through vichara, in this more general sense, you can catch yourself. You can catch the ego in the act, and so that's crucial in spiritual life.
Spirituality and happiness, is that something very related? And you define happiness as a spirituality?
Well, can you reframe your question in a way that's
happiness, we are just
clear?
talking about happiness a lot these days, right?
Mhm.
People are trying to get happiness.
Yeah.
So this path of spirituality, like you are just like Google, you are practicing towards that, those various ways you are doing it. At the end of it,
Just half a cup. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, at the end of it, like you get a kind of a feeling where you can just like detachment with attachment. You're saying, so is that something leading you to mental satisfaction as kind of happiness?
I see.
These two words are very confusing to me.
What are the two words?
Yes.
No, what are the two
happiness
words?
and spirituality.
Oh, I see. And what might be the connection, if there is any? Yeah. So there are a lot of things to say about this. I mean, it could be a whole lecture actually. But one of the things is, Taittiriya Upanishad talks about different kinds of ananda. And again, there's a beautiful passage in this Upanishad which compares different kinds of happiness. And it says, imagine one unit of human happiness, of somebody who has no wants or needs, perfectly satisfied. That's one unit of human happiness. Now multiply that by 100. There's some mathematical calculation. And then you get the happiness of a Gandharva or something like that. And it goes up and up and up and up. And it says, but none of these kinds of happiness compares to the happiness of one who is conversant in the Vedic scriptures and who is free from worldly desires. You see. And there's a verse in the Mahabharata which is about this. It says, take all the kinds of happiness in this world and in the higher lokas, the heavens and all that. It's nothing compared to the bliss of Trishna Kshaya Sukham, of getting rid of your worldly desires. Because every time you get rid of a worldly desire, you get rid of, you reduce that gaping hole in your heart. You make it a little smaller. You see, every desire means that you are not complete in yourself without that external thing that you need. So the moment, let's say if you have 5 desires, now if you reduce to 4 desires, you only have that gaping hole gets a little smaller. If you have 3 desires, the gaping hole gets smaller. When you have 0 desires, no hole at all. You're complete in yourself. You don't need anything or anyone outside of you. Sorry, I was going on. So, oh yeah, happiness, right? Okay, now, another part of the issue is positive psychology. There's a whole subfield of psychology, contemporary psychology, academic psychology, which is devoted to happiness, actually. Another name for it is happiness studies. Because for a long time, the field of psychology was dominated by neurosis. You're helping patients with debilitating mental health issues, helping them to do what? To become quote unquote normal. Freud said in German, wo es war, da ich sein soll, which means where the unconscious was, there the ego shall be. So the goal is to let the ego take control. Of course, that's not the goal in spiritual life, you see. Positive psychology takes off where Freudian psychology stops in a way. Even once you have a healthy ego, then the next question is, how do I get genuine happiness or authentic happiness? So one of the most famous positive psychologists, his name is Martin Seligman. He wrote an excellent book called Authentic Happiness. And he contrasts different kinds of happiness. And he says that, look, there's the kind of happiness which is based on a life of maximal sense pleasures. It's a life of hedonism, where your main aim in life is to maximize pleasure. And he says, ironically, you'll find that these people are the most miserable. And if you go to Vedanta, you'll know what the reasons are for that. Okay. Then he says, but there's a different kind of life that can give you authentic happiness. He calls that the good life and a meaningful life. And he says, what are the key ingredients? He says, there are 2 steps in finding authentic happiness. Number 1, you might be surprised, identify your signature strengths, is what Martin Seligman says. Identify your signature strengths. Anyone who knows the Gita here, can you make a connection with any concept in the Gita? Identify your signature strengths. Anyone? Any guesses?
Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are Kshatriya.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you're on the right track. Exactly. What's the term that's used by Krishna? Bangla, Shodharmo, Swadharma. Swadharma. Krishna tells Arjuna, your Swadharma is to be a warrior. You must fight. That's your duty. And by doing it well, and with the spiritual attitude as worship of me, you can attain the highest. And the Swadharma is explained in terms of the 3 gunas in Gita as well. You see. And so you can, depending on which guna dominates in you, your line of work, your calling will differ. You see. And so there are deep similarities between contemporary psychology and the great ancient insights of Vedanta. So that's the step 1 of Seligman. Identify your signature strengths. Fortunately, we can get the help of surveys. Like there's an online survey which he, I think with a team, created, which I did, and it's very helpful. It just gives you, it spits out, after you take the survey, the list of your top 5 signature strengths. And some of them surprised me. I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have guessed them myself. Number 2, once you've identified your signature strengths, find a way of life, a calling, a vocation that helps you to cultivate those signature strengths. He says, those 2 steps, if you do both of them successfully, you will find authentic happiness. That again, you find directly in the Bhagavad Gita. Swabhava niyatam karma kurvan napnoti kilbisham. If you find a vocation and you lead your life in accordance with your swabhava or your swadharma, your own law of being, based on your signature strengths, you will make the most rapid spiritual progress, you will be fulfilled in life, and you will be able to maximally benefit society. Because a well-functioning society is one that will give somebody who is sort of inclined to do medical work to become a doctor, and somebody whose gift is in practicing law to become a lawyer, and somebody whose gift is to be a monk to become a monk. You see, it's an ideal society in a way. That's the original idea of the caste system, which has become a taboo now. People say Hinduism is based on the caste system and all sorts of nonsense, which is false. But of course, the current caste system is bad. It's a hereditary caste system. That's not the original caste system. And it's not the highest ideal of the caste system. In fact, if you look at the Gita, Krishna defines caste not in terms of heredity. There's not one hint that caste system is based on heredity. It's based on 2 terms in Gita, guna and karma. Guna is one's innate qualities, signature strengths like Seligman, you see. Second is karma, your behavior. How do you behave in the world? These 2 things determine your caste. A well-functioning society has to be based on should be based on that kind of a caste system. Not hereditary, but you should find out what each person's strengths and weaknesses are and allow them to pursue a vocation, a line of work that helps them to cultivate their strengths and to minimize their weaknesses. or to turn their weaknesses into strengths, let's say. So the idea behind the original caste system is a very sensible one, it seems to me, and again dovetails very well with positive psychology. Identify your signature strengths, find a calling that is in accord with your signature strengths. This is the caste system based on guna and karma, it seems to me. So authentic happiness, I think you find in the Gita and in positive psychology based on these two key steps. And again, I'm addressing many Indians here, but because I grew up, by my Bengali parents, and especially my father, mechanical engineer, mother was a scientist, and my father would be pushing me into science because it's more prestigious. And I knew that it would not make me happy. But he forced me to enroll as a computer science major at Berkeley. After 1 year, I changed. I mustered the courage to change to philosophy and English. And in India, it's what's called the Madhyamika exam, 10th grade exam, like the SAT in India. And if you do really well, you go into science subjects, the science stream, as they call it. If you fail, you go into arts stream. Arts it's the equivalent of humanities. So if you're stupid, if you're a flunky, you study Sanskrit, you study philosophy, Bengali, English. And if you do really well, you study engineering or medicine, or nowadays hard sciences are also becoming popular.
But there's
Yeah.
arts and commerce also separate.
Yeah, commerce but that's not in the highest. Yeah, so one step above arts might be commerce. One step above commerce, maybe, or commerce and psychology are at the same level, maybe. I mean, there's a whole elaborate ranking among Bengalis and Indians. So anyway, all this is foolish, frankly, and it goes against Vedanta and Gita, actually. And so that's why I'm specifically telling Indian parents to be less Indian in these ways and more Vedantic. Less culturally Indian and more spiritually Indian. We'll put it that way. Yeah.
Two things online. One
Yeah.
says, I guess they wrote Swadharma
Mm.
was one of the comments. But there's another question here. Has Satyug already begun since the coming of Sri Ramakrishna?
Satya Yuga.
They put
Yeah, that's an
Satya-
interesting, because Swami Medhanandaji said that with the advent of Sri Ramakrishna, the Satya Yuga has begun. That's a tough one. I mean, how do you interpret that? And does he mean it as a metaphor? I don't want to give a facile answer here. And I want to sort of leave it up to you, but I tend to take that more metaphorically, and that it's a Satya Yuga within the Kali Yuga. Maybe is the way to think about it. And even in this time of great spiritual darkness, there is this incredible ray of light and hope in the form of Sri Ramakrishna, who has made spiritual life much easier for us and more accessible and more joyous. I find that to be maybe a more plausible explanation. But I'm open to other possible interpretations of that, maybe a more literal one. Yeah, but so that comment was just one word, it was just Swadharma? Or was there actual?
Yeah, I
was
think
there-
when you were talking about the Gita,
Oh, I see, he gave the answer,
Yeah.
or he or she, yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. Thank you. That's correct, yes, exactly. These
See,
online
these-
people are smart. I gave a class the other day in the gospel, and I just said in the course of the class, I said, there's an Upanishadic passage about how God will choose to elevate some people spiritually and bring others down, degrade them. And I said, it's not one of the canonical Upanishads, but I can't remember which Upanishad. Within seconds, an online person, go see the Upanishad and give 3.8. I was very impressed. It was great. So
Google, right?
this is called crowdsourcing. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing about the internet. That's great. Sri Ramakrishna would say, under the same street lamp, you can either read the Bhagavata, read the Holy Scriptures, or you can forge checks. You can do either. So the internet's like that. You can do wonderful things, and you can watch spiritual discourses on YouTube, and you can connect with other spiritual aspirants and do so many things. Or you can watch pornography and this and that and do a million things to degrade the mind.
There is one act which is generally carried out by the troops.
So,
by the troops.
TROOPS?
Yes, correct. Soldiers.
Oh.
The group of soldiers when they go for it. So war cry you heard about. So every regiment has a different of war.
Mhm.
When the war cry sounds, the attitude of entire troops
Changes. Yeah.
get aligned.
They
with
get
something.
motivated. Oh, I see. They
Get
feel.
aligned with something.
Right.
Practically, I have seen those things.
Well, look at a sports arena.
The sports arena.
And everybody shouting the chant together is a way of building this community feeling, like supporting their team.
My question is, at that point of time, whomsoever is involved passionately in that kind of activity, are they detached? Are they following some kind of experience, or they are getting some kind of spiritual experiences?
Mhm.
Because mine get blanks
Mhm.
that I experienced, at least.
Right. They're getting out of their ego, but they're identifying with just a larger form of ego, in a sense.
That is another form of proud. You know?
Pride. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's another form of.
Pride is something.
It's just a bigger ego. It's the ego of country. The ego of family is once you see, if you're single, you might have just your individual ego. Then you marry. Then you have a spousal ego. Then you have kids. Then you have this family ego. Why do I still call it ego? You take pride in your spouse and your kids. You're very attached to them. That's why I call it ego. You see, there are sort of extreme patriots who are kind of, it's called jingoism, which means excessive patriotism, being kind of so nationalistic about your country that you look down on other countries. That's national ego. This is a big problem all over the world, actually, nationalism in different countries. That's a form of ego. It's just an enlarged ego. You see, you can become egoistic about being a devotee of a particular tradition and saying that my tradition is greater than your tradition. I've seen it even in our own tradition. My goodness. In the name of Sri Ramakrishna, to have that kind of Ramakrishna ego is like, but some people have it. And it's crazy. Yeah.
All species have herd instinct. All species have herd instinct.
Oh, the HERD, yeah, herd instinct, yeah.
Yeah, so is that like the combined ego? The herd as a combined ego?
Yeah, I mean, there are biological evolutionary reasons why we feel this kind of collective buzz when we go to a Taylor Swift concert and everybody's singing along together, and it might feel like a spiritual experience. It's not a spiritual experience. You're getting out of that small eye, but entering this bigger eye, and it's often very primitive, and that's why this herd instinct idea, the things that, it's like often very primitive, like the kinds of chants that you sing and the kind of feelings that it evokes. That's why hooliganism is a big problem, especially in England, in football games. Physical violence is very common. And they'll start throwing things at the other team and at fans of the other team. Isn't this bestial? This is herd instinct. All of this is just kind of mindless, bestial kind of behavior.
So the detachment and attachment actually. So here, like we feel like we are looking everyone as the same, like everyone as a con.
Yeah.
But when we have like a family, like we are single, we don't have much of focus. But when we have family, we are focusing on our many needs.
Sure.
Family to connect to. So do you think like having a detachment on that way, or it's slowing down the economics, or like if you don't need anything, then where is the improvement on the society? So
as I said,
important?
going back to the Gita, Sattvika Karta, Dhriti Utsaha Smanvitaha, that person who's detached is full of enthusiasm. So again, this is going back to this. Being detached doesn't mean you're indifferent or you're doing your work or your duties as a father or as a spouse less well than you otherwise would, or with only half a heart. That's not the idea. You do it full of enthusiasm. But Sri Ramakrishna would say, take the example of somebody a maidservant who comes to a rich person's house. And the rich person's going to work and says, can you look after my kids? So she looks after the kids and refers to him as my Hari, my Lakshmi. Doesn't she know in her heart of hearts that Hari is not hers and that Lakshmi is not hers? She knows. At the end of the day, she's going to go back to her own children. Likewise, if you can raise your kids in that same spirit, that's the spiritual attitude. Even your own children are actually gods. God has entrusted you for a certain period of time to look after his own children. That should be the spiritual attitude. Especially in
Theoretically, it
India,
sounds correct.
in Indian culture, I do feel that because I lived in India for 13 years, and so these are hard truths, but I'm saying them. There's too much. So in the West, the big problem is the opposite. I mean, there are two extremes. In the West, there are almost no cohesive nuclear families because the divorce rates are through the roof, and there are all sorts of, the broken families is more common than a stable family, and that creates all sorts of mental complexes in children, and it really affects them adversely. In India, there's too much attachment among the family members, and they're too dependent on each other. And I find that like a 20-year-old Indian person, adult, might behave like a 13-year-old American, in terms of maturity level. Why? Because they're still living with their parents, even up to the age of 30 sometimes. They'll be living with their parents. The mother will be cooking for them every day. They won't pay rent, this and that. You see, there's a middle ground to be had. One thing I like about the West is the spirit of independence. Parents who might have a lot of money, but the moment their children come of age and the children will want to live with them, they'll say, then pay rent. If you want to live with us, you pay $500 a month. Not because they need the money. It's a way of disciplining their children so that they don't become dependent. And almost every Indian family, these large families, and I know one because I have one back in India, with cousins, everybody living under one roof. What happens is one person who's a good for nothing. At least one person. Sri Krishna would say, Kumro Kata Mama, right? The one useless uncle who, the one job, he doesn't have a proper day job. He doesn't make any, not even 1 cent, 1 paisa for the family. But what does he do? Once a month when you need a squash to be cut, oh, uncle, can you cut the squash? Yes, of course. He cuts the squash, and then he goes back to sitting on the couch and eating potato chips and watching TV. So that's the danger in the Indian kind of approach to family life. And then the Western side, of course, is very bad in the other direction and at the other extreme. But there's a middle ground. If we can take the best of India and the West, that would be wonderful. That family bond without the attachment, and that spirit of independence without this kind of, just a really terrible home life, where you don't care for your family members, where once your parents become of a certain age, you dump them in a nursing home, or you may not even do that because that's expensive. And Indian culture, they revere the elderly. The children will often be taking their parents into their homes and look after them themselves. That's wonderful.
I had things buzzing around, but
Oh yeah, you had your hand up. So
I did,
Yeah.
and I think you kind of answered.
oh,
it.
okay,
I-
all right.
I lost it. a
And you got
little
2 more
bit.
days. Don't worry.
No, exactly. I
Yeah.
understand. I want to say it has something to do with, for example, like spiritual practice. For example, sometimes things will happen. Somebody will do something that irritates me, and I often wonder, is this being done? In other words, is this being given to me
As a
because
test
I've
or
been
something.
looking exactly.
Yeah, everything.
And so-
yeah.
And so I try to, when I remember, just try to reframe it and try to look at
Absolutely.
it that way.
I think that's great.
And,
Yeah.
For example, someone where I live at, they may leave a mess. They,
Mm-hmm.
don't clean up after themselves or do their dishes.
Mhm.
I have to go behind them and constantly do that. So I try to look at that as a way for me to remember and to, remember my mantra and to say that, to remember God, to think that I'm doing this for God and not for,
Yeah.
some other reason or whatever. But I don't want to get caught or stuck in a cycle where I like bring on this negativity and
Right.
so forth. Yeah, it's hard for me to explain. But
No, but I think
see it happen.
the basic point I think is really great, which is that the right attitude for spiritual aspirants is to see everything as an opportunity for spiritual practice, as a kind of test. If it's something really good from a worldly standpoint, like you get that dream job that you've been wanting for a long time, how do you react? Are you elated and feeling very proud and wow, all that hard work paid off, and and bragging to others about it? That's ego, you see. Then you fail the test in a certain way. And moments of depression and failure and temptation, how do you behave? That you can take everything as a test across the board, both good, bad, and ugly, and everything in between. Your interactions with others, every single one of them, pleasant or unpleasant, should be, if you take them in the spirit of a test, a spiritual test. Somebody saying something which would normally irritate me. Now, as a spiritual aspirant, how do I not let it get to me? That's the challenge, right?
It's a big challenge.
It's difficult. Because irritation is an emotional reaction. Anything is anger, irritation, even elation, right? That's why when something good happens to you and you jump on cloud 9, that's also an emotional reaction. That's also bondage in spiritual life. That's why when you make spiritual progress, the highs are less high and the lows are less low. And there's this equilibrium, which is actually a more authentic happiness than that's. It's like that elation is a drug high, and it's the high of falling in love. You're going to come crashing down eventually, and then you're really going to hit rock bottom at some point. So better to be even keel. Samatva, Gita talks about.
Are there any methods, or are there any ways that for us not to deceive ourselves?
Yeah, I plan to give another lecture
Okay,
called,
so
not
that's a
here,
lecture
but
as
at some
well.
point, called Self-Deception in Spiritual Life, because there are 1,000,001 ways of deceiving ourselves.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure, Swami Medhanandaji, he gave a rough percentage, and he said, in religious life, 80% are cheats. And here I take cheats to mean, he said it in Bengali, but so I don't remember the exact Bengali word here, but I think it's both cheating others and cheating yourself. So it's either, frauds who are kind of making a living out of, getting money from being a spiritual figure, even though they're leading a very worldly life. That's one thing. But the more dangerous form of fraudulence and cheating is cheating yourself, actually. 80% of people in religious life cheating either themselves or others or both. He said 15% go crazy, 5% are sincere. Even in spiritual life, those numbers they should haunt us. They should keep us up at night. And we should ask ourselves, which category are we in? Are we in that coveted 5%?
Yeah. So that's why I asked the question, because it seems, speaking for myself, I watch others and see others, and I just try to take, from them what I can, and not, judge or whatever.
The very fact that you're asking these questions is a good sign. That makes me more likely to put you in the 5% category. Do you see what I mean? Most of these people,
I think that's so I don't want to put myself there, but sometimes I think, well, gosh, I'm doing this and doing that. Well, why? I guess maybe I'm looking for something that maybe I shouldn't be looking for. For example, when I talked about, sometimes getting irritated. Oftentimes I don't, but sometimes I do, but then I kind of berate myself and say, gosh, why did you do that? Why did you, why did you let that?
Right.
Even if it's only for a few seconds.
Sure.
Come in.
That's a good sign. As I said, the very fact that you're looking back and regretting it, saying I shouldn't have done that, that's called vichara. That's in response to one of Jeff's earlier questions. That's the kind of vichara that every sincere spiritual aspirant should be engaged in. You have to do vichara to catch yourself in the act when you're becoming egoistic, when you're losing your temper, when you're becoming irritated. And insincere spiritual aspirants are the ones who don't do that vichara. You see, the first step is to acknowledge your weakness. The next step is to try to overcome that weakness through prayer and other spiritual practices. But unless you know that you're weak, and if you pass off your weaknesses as strengths, that is the greatest kind of self-deception. That's why I'm so skeptical of people who talk in public about their spiritual, so-called spiritual experiences. Most likely they're in that 80% category.
I think that's probably it.
All right.
2 hours, but
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody, and Swami, thank you so much. Let's give Swami a
Thank you, everyone, both in person and online, for
Yeah.
the wonderful
And
questions.
we want to thank, we want to thank everybody for your questions. We're going to have a little bit of prasad here, but also we want to invite you to put any flowers you want on the altar. We have two murtis, new murtis, if you haven't been here for a while. We have Ma Kali there on the center of the altar, and we have Lord Shiva as well. So feel free.
When did you get them?
I've owned those for a long time, and they were from India, but I felt they should be down here.
Yes.
So now they're going to be here for the rest of it. So please, and thank you so much. We'll hopefully see you tomorrow at the Hindu
Tomorrow
temple
in the temple
in
3, right?
3 o'clock. We're
3
gonna
o'clock
start
tomorrow at the Hindu temple, and Sunday at what time?
at 4 o'clock here.
4 o'clock here.
And we're gonna go hiking tomorrow, like we're talking about, in the mountain, Red Rock Mountain. We're gonna be, starting at 9 o'clock, we're gonna be there. So we're gonna meet here at 8:30.
You
Tomorrow
went
morning.
there last time also.
I'm sorry?
Last time you went there, right?
Did you
No,
go
we went to a different part. We're going to a different part this time.
The last time was rain or something. right?
Yeah, so this is gonna be an easier, fun, less rainy situation, I
This
hope.
week is very
The
good.
weather's great.
So if you
It's
wanna join
perfect
us,
weather for hiking.
just meet us here at 8:30 at the center. Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
All right,
so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you, everybody. And we will see you, and thank you online. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur. Okay.